Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Hauntflix Horrors, the place where nightmares come to life. If you love spine-chilling tales that send shivers down your spine, you've come to the right place. Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button for more terrifying stories that will keep you up at night. Are you ready to be scared? Because the darkness is waiting. Let's dive in. My eyes were glued to the road. I had been driving since dawn, and now the sun was beginning to set. All of my worldly possessions were packed so high in my tiny hatchback that I couldn't see out the back window. Making it all fit was like a real-life game of Tetris, but I needed to make it work because I could never go back. Let's just say I was looking for a fresh start, a new beginning. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and traveling alone at night can be dangerous, especially on remote stretches of highway like this one. Rest stops were few and far between, and there was almost nobody else on the road. That's why I was relieved to see a sign for a diner just a mile ahead. I didn't care much for greasy food, but something was drawing me to this place. I couldn't resist. At the very least, I'd get a coffee. As the diner's neon lights appeared on the horizon, I was struck by how isolated it was. There was nothing else for miles in either direction, just empty fields surrounding the highway. I drove toward the diner and parked away from the few flickering lampposts that dotted the almost empty lot. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in. I looked around and smiled when I noticed that the large dining area was deserted. I was the only one there, apart from a lone employee behind the counter. He was around 45, slightly overweight, with a scruffy beard. His yellowed teeth seemed to glow under the dim lights. I don't think he noticed me until I was right in front of the counter. "Oh, hey there. What can I get you?" he asked, his voice rough. "Just a coffee, please," I replied. "Sure thing. I'll have to brew a fresh pot. You got time to wait?" he asked. "No rush," I said. "So, what's a lady like you doing alone in the middle of nowhere?" He leaned over the counter, a little too close for comfort. I gave him a brief explanation, mentioning that I was seeking a new life and could never return to where I came from. His demeanor changed at that, his eyes narrowing slightly. He leaned in further and said, "You know, the coffee might take a bit. Why don't you come to the back with me while we wait?" His breath was rancid, like something had died inside him. "All right, let's go," I said, surprising him with a flirty wink. He looked shocked, clearly not expecting that response. The shock quickly faded, and he gestured for me to follow him. I clutched my purse as we walked into a small back room. The door swung shut behind us, and I locked it with a firm click. He turned to me with an eager grin, but his smile quickly faded when he saw the cold look in my eyes. The tension in the room was palpable as he realized something was off. His grin faltered, replaced by a look of confusion and fear. "What's going on here?" he stammered. I didn't answer, just reached into my purse and pulled out a small vial of clear liquid. I could see the panic rising in his eyes. Whoa, hold on now," he said, raising his hands defensively. "Relax," I whispered. "It's just something to help you sleep." He tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. I grabbed his arm, swiftly injecting the liquid into his neck. His eyes widened in shock, and he tried to scream, but the sound caught in his throat. Within seconds, his body slumped to the floor, unconscious. I watched him for a moment, ensuring he was out cold, then turned and walked back into the main dining area. I grabbed a coffee cup from the counter and filled it, taking a moment to savor the warmth and the quiet. As I stepped back outside, I could feel the cool evening air against my skin. The man would wake up in a few hours with a splitting headache, but otherwise unharmed. I wasn't a killer. I just needed to be sure I could leave without any complications. Sliding back into my car, I made a mental note of one more place to which I could never return. I took one last look at the diner before driving off into the night, ready to start my new life. I had been working at McDonald's's for what felt like an eternity. It was just supposed to be a temporary gig, something to get me through high school. But after graduation, I was still there, flipping burgers and running the register. The job was monotonous, but the people I worked with made it bearable. My manager was decent, and my coworkers were mostly good company. But something had changed recently. The late night shifts were starting to wear on me, especially at this location. The place was old, tucked away on the edge of town, close to a dense, dark forest that always seemed to whisper secrets to anyone willing to listen. The restaurant had an uneasy aura, especially during the night shift, when the bustling energy of the day gave way to a stillness that was almost oppressive. I had been struggling to keep up with my bills, so when I saw a job posting for the night shift at this location, promising nearly double the pay, I jumped at the chance. My usual McDonald's closed at 10 p.m., but this one stayed open 24 hours, primarily catering to truck drivers and the occasional drifter passing through. The shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., the dead of night, when the world outside seemed to slumber, but something else stirred. It was on one of those nights that I met Greg. He was new, just like me, a lanky guy with hollow cheeks and eyes that seemed too dark, almost as if they absorbed all the light around them. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it was in a low, almost guttural tone that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We got along fine, though, or at least we tolerated each other in the silence of the night. But then I began to notice things. Greg would disappear for long stretches during his smoke breaks, slipping into the shadows at the edge of the parking lot. I started to wonder what he was really doing out there, in the dark, where the forest loomed close. One night, while taking out the trash, I saw him again. But this time, he wasn't alone. A man, much older, wearing a tattered gray hoodie, was standing with him, their heads close together in a whispered conversation. As I watched, I saw the man hand Greg a small package, and in return, Greg slipped him a wad of cash. It wasn't hard to figure out what was going on, but I tried to push the thought from my mind. I didn't want to get involved. But then Greg noticed me. He turned slowly, his dark eyes locking onto mine, and there was something in his gaze that froze me to the spot. It wasn't just anger or annoyance. It was something deeper, something almost inhuman. His lips curled into a sneer, and I could swear I heard a low growl, like an animal warning off an intruder. I hurried back inside, but when Greg returned from his smoke break, he cornered me near the back of the kitchen. His voice was a harsh whisper as he leaned in close and hissed, "If you tell anyone about this, I'll make sure you disappear." There was a coldness in his words that sent a shiver down my spine, as if he wasn't just threatening me, but promising something inevitable. After that night, Greg and I barely spoke, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, always lingering just out of sight. The atmosphere at work grew heavier, more suffocating, as if the very walls of the restaurant were closing in on me. And then the nightmares started. Every night, I would dream of the forest behind the restaurant, of shadowy figures moving between the trees, their eyes glowing like embers. In the dreams, I would wander into the woods, drawn by whispers that I couldn't understand, until I found myself standing before a massive tree, its bark twisted and blackened. And there, at the base of the tree, I would see Greg, his eyes burning with an unnatural light, and he would smile, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long. Then came the night when I realized it wasn't just dreams. Driving home after my shift, I noticed a car trailing me, its headlights distant but persistent. My heart raced as I glanced in the rearview mirror and recognized the shadowy figure behind the wheel. It was Greg, his face obscured by the darkness, but his eyes, they were glowing, just like in my nightmares. Panic gripped me, and I sped up, taking random turns to try and lose him. But the car stayed with me, always a few paces behind. Finally, I veered off the main road and headed toward the forest, hoping to shake him. The car followed, but as soon as I reached the edge of the trees, Greg's car skidded to a stop. He didn't follow me into the woods. Instead, he just sat there, watching, those glowing eyes burning into me. I don't know what compelled me, but I kept driving into the forest, my heart pounding in my chest. The trees closed in around me, their branches scraping against the sides of my car like skeletal fingers. I drove deeper and deeper until the road ended, and there, in front of me, was the tree from my nightmares, the twisted, blackened tree. As I stared at the tree, my car engine died, plunging me into a suffocating silence. The air thickened with unnatural stillness, and I sensed a malevolent presence behind me. I turned slowly to see Greg, his eyes glowing with an unholy light. "You shouldn't have come here," he rumbled, his voice echoing with dread. I tried to move, to scream, but fear paralyzed me. Greg's form twisted into something monstrous. He raised a clawed hand and pointed at the tree. "You belong to the forest now," he whispered. Roots wrapped around my legs, dragging me toward the tree. My screams were swallowed by darkness, as Greg's twisted smile, with eyes burning like fire, was the last thing I saw. The next morning, my car was found abandoned at the forest's edge. I was never seen again. Some say I ran away. Others whisper of the haunted forest and the figure with glowing eyes. But the truth is far worse. I am now part of the forest, bound to the twisted tree, forever a prisoner of the night, while Greg searches for his next victim. I've worked at McDonald's's for a few months now, mostly doing night shifts. It's quiet, almost too quiet sometimes, but it pays the bills. Lately, though, things have been getting weird. I don't know how else to describe it. It all started when I noticed something odd about the basement storage. The place is always freezing, even in the middle of summer, and it has this musty, old smell that doesn't belong in a fast food joint. But what really creeps me out is the way the lights flicker down there, even after we've had the bulbs changed multiple times. It's like the shadows in the corners are alive, moving just out of sight. One night, I was taking inventory down there when I heard a faint humming sound. It was barely audible at first, but as I listened, it grew louder. It was an old, haunting tune, like something from a music box. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just the wind, or maybe some faulty wiring. But then I heard it. Laughter, soft and childlike, echoing through the storage room. I looked around, my flashlight darting from one dark corner to the next, but there was nothing. No one. The laughter faded, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me. A few nights later, I was closing up when I noticed one of the Happy Meal toys was missing from the display case. We always lock it up, so it was strange that it would be gone. I figured someone must have taken it out earlier and forgotten to put it back, so I didn't think much of it until I found it sitting on the counter the next morning. It was one of those creepy clown toys, the kind with the big red nose and painted-on smile. It hadn't been there the night before. I was sure of it. I tried to ask my coworkers, but no one knew how it got there. They just shrugged it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The final straw came last week. I was the last one out, locking up the store, when I heard a noise behind me. It sounded like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I turned around, but the dining area was empty. The chairs were all stacked, the tables wiped clean. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, the clown toy, standing upright on one of the tables. It wasn't there a second ago, I swear. I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin as I stared at it, its painted eyes seeming to follow me. I bolted out of there, leaving the lights on and the doors unlocked. I didn't care. I just needed to get out. I haven't been back since. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that music box tune, and I can't help but wonder if it's calling me back, waiting for me to return to that haunted McDonald's. But I won't. Not ever. I'm never going back.